Let me put it to you this way. Genes are forever. Everything else with friends and such is finite. I have tons of distant relatives. I don't want to get into too many specifics, but suffice it to say, my grandparents' generation, there were way more children of my great grandparents compared to children of my parents, aunts, uncles, and their respective cousins. Like, I can observe there were at least four siblings in each house for my grandparents' generation. Same thing with my parents' generation. But then when you get to the millennials, zoomers, and Gen Alpha for my family, for all the great grandchildren of my great grandparents, there were usually two or three siblings at most. Okay, there was one only child in my mom's generation, like in the context of that family tree, but yeah, for the most part, there were at least four. Now it's always twos and threes. Which brings me to today's article, which is from The Times, so British perspective here, but I want to see what they have to say. Why cousins are a dying breed. It matters more than you might think. By Joey D'Urso and Evie Power for the Sunday Times for The Times. Before we find out how cousins are a dying breed, don't forget to give this video a like if you enjoy it. Comment what you think along the way, whether you're experiencing this smaller family or if you happen to have a larger family. Me personally, I don't have as many first cousins as my mom did, but I do have a lot of second cousins I could talk about. Okay, again, I'm not going to get into too much detail. Suffice it to say, I can safely report it is definitely a social norm to only have two or three children among the Gen Xers of my family tree compared to the silent Jenners and the boomers who would have at least four. Then going back even further, same thing for my great grandparents' generation. I think they might fall under the greatest. Don't quote me on that. Anyway, let's get into the article. Oh, don't forget to subscribe for daily videos of cultural commentary from a man caught between generations. Truett Burks, 19, has just one cousin, Lincoln, who was 5 years younger than him. It meant that family gatherings as he was growing up were usually small affairs. There was no kids' table when we were younger, so we would just sit with the aunts and uncles, he said. They're British, so I'm gonna try doing a British accent for these voices. To any Brits who are watching, if I butcher the accent, I apologize in advance, but we try to have a little fun here. Also, I can safely say, even when it was just four grandchildren of my grandparents on my mom's side total before my younger cousins were born, there was still something of a kids' table. Even with there being a total of seven of us now, plus all the Gen Xers, There is no kids' table, mostly because the youngest is now 10, and therefore there's really no need for a kids' table. He is close to his siblings, Oliver, his twin, and Foster, 15, but extended family is not a big part of his life. A generation ago, Burks's family was far larger. His mother, Charlotte, and father, David, have 5 siblings and 7 cousins between them. I think having a small family does move you away from being as family oriented, said Burks, who is studying English at Durham University. Smaller families are on the rise, and amid a fall in the birth rate, Britain is on the brink of a cousin crash. And here's Truett as a kid with his siblings and the one cousin. In the 1970s, a British teenager had an average of 7 cousins. Amateur numbers. My mom had like 30 something cousins between both sides of her family when they were all tallied up. Because each of the Silent Gen members of my family had at least 5 or so, with the exception of the lone only child I mentioned earlier. Whereas the number of first cousins I have is 6 total. So yeah, I can safely say that I fall below the British average. Today, it's 5, according to research by Diego Alvarez Gutierrez of the Max Planck Institute for Demographic Research, alongside fellow academics Ivan Williams and Hal Caswell. This is projected to fall to 4 by the end of this century. Burks said, "Despite not having too many cousins, I still grew up with a strong sense of family community, because there were so many aunts and uncles around." I am so curious about how that's going to go in later in this century when there aren't that many aunts and uncles around. The fallen cousins is more fundamental than fewer presents at birthdays and Christmas. In terms of your long-term physical and mental well-being, your close relationships matter, according to Professor Robin Dunbar of Oxford University. Dunbar, an anthropologist and evolutionary psychologist, had one cousin growing up in Africa, a long way from his extended family in the UK, but nevertheless became fascinated by the science behind our bonds with family and friends. He came up with Dunbar's number, which posits there's a limit of about 150 meaningful social relationships anyone can maintain. The brain's probably hardwired for it because that's how it was for a lot of human history. Whereas today, the human brain still can't comprehend the massive number of people that we can get in touch with. Or we keep better records of it, or we keep them longer than expected. I'm just going to take a quick peek at how many 271 Facebook friends I have. That is almost double the 150. But it's not like I even see posts from a lot of them. Some stopped posting. Some are probably inactive accounts or barely active accounts. Others are distant relatives that I haven't seen since 2023 is the last time I remember seeing really any of the anti-seatbelt great uncles section of my family tree. Yeah, it was a graduation party for one of my second cousins. For context, that's a fellow great grandchild of one of my great grandparents. Getting back to the article. In early human societies, that 150 would overwhelmingly be made up of extended family members, but then people started having fewer and fewer children. That meant relationship slots, once allocated to cousins, became empty. You fill the rest up with friends who are much less reliable, Dunbar said. There are plenty of reliable friends and useless cousins, he said, but family connections tend to be more stable over time. Yeah, because you've got something in common that can't exactly be taken away so easily. Like in the case of my second cousin whose graduation party I just brought up from 2 years ago now, we are both great grandchildren of the same great grandparents. One of his grandparents is one of my grandparents' siblings, and then one of his parents is one of my parents' first cousins. You get the idea. That's why we still are somewhat close with my upstate New York relatives, even though I sometimes go years without seeing them in person. I saw them in person last year for my cousin's son's first birthday party. Before that, it was my other cousin's wedding 3 years earlier. Before that, it was another 3 years earlier for my uncle's wedding. Okay, I didn't see my cousins at that. It's a long story. I'm not going to go into detail. But anyway, before that, it had been 7 years since I had been there for one of their Sweet 16 birthday parties. I think the last time any of them were here, for one of them, it's been over 10 years since I saw them here in Massachusetts. 9 since the other one. Yeah. No. 6 years. Because one of them went with my uncle to a Patriots game in 2019. I met them for lunch. Getting back to the article, family networks are like a spider's web, he said. Your relationship with your cousin is kept in place not just by your interaction with your cousin, but also with your interaction with any number of intervening relatives. That isn't true of friendships, which tend to be more individual and personal. Aging populations and falling birth rates mean people have more living grandparents and great grandparents, but fewer nieces, nephews, grandchildren, and cousins. Population pyramid is inverting. Right now, for my family, it's only got a strong enough base because the millennials, zoomers, and the oldest Gen Alpha members make up the base because most of the grandchildren of my great grandparents had 2 or 3 children each, with some exceptions. Okay, there was another only child. But other than that, The majority of them had 2 or 3, but that was the maximum compared to the silent Jenners having at least 4 in most cases, except for the lone only child in that particular generation. And then so far for the millennials and zoomers, some of the millennials on in that particular section of my family tree are starting to have kids. None of the zoomers are even close. The average baby born in 2023, when the fertility rate for England and Wales was about 1.5 babies per woman, is likely to have one sibling or none. When this baby's parents were born, the UK fertility rate was quite a bit higher at about 2 babies per woman, meaning these new parents are likely to have a sibling each or 2 biological aunts or uncles for the baby. And they have here a typical family tree of a baby born in 2023. So they might have a couple cousins. They're likely to be an only child. And then they jump back to 1993. You've got 7 cousins. I'm assuming this is a firstborn. In the early 1960s, though, when the new baby's grandparents were born, the birth rate was a lot higher, about 3 per woman. This means an early 1990s baby might expect to have 4 biological aunts and uncles, and thus is likely to have significantly more cousins compared to their child of the 2020s. What it all means, Alvarez Gutierrez believes there will be a shift away from children growing up with lots of relatives their own age, their siblings and cousins, to them spending more time with grandparents and even great-grandparents. Again, inversion of the population pyramid. Although I attribute the top part not shrinking as fast just to the fact that medical technology allows people to live longer, which is a good thing. It's a good thing that people are able to live longer. Getting back to the article, families will become older and smaller, he said. Family sizes are decreasing in general, and you can attribute a lot of that change to cousins. Cousins are often able to offer each other support, financial, practical, or emotional, that can be called upon even after years of little contact, he said. This happens less often with long lost friends. When it comes to the benefits of cousins, Alvarez Gutierrez said that while people do choose their friends, they often tend to come from the same narrow social demographic, which isn't always a good thing. Distant family members are often different, he said, sticking up for a stereotypical relative. The cantankerous uncle who brings up controversial topics around the Christmas dinner table. You get exposed to ideas or points of view that are different. The role of grandparents is important when it comes to cousins developing a bond as children. Although cousins tend to naturally drift apart a little when grandparents die, some sense of connection is likely to remain. It's about obligation. Family members are much more likely to say yes, Dunbar said. That means that might mean something life-changing like lending money or helping to pick up the pieces when somebody passes away. It might just mean someone to borrow a lawnmower off, Dunbar said. Yeah, it's because you have something in common that is a lot less, what's the word? A lot less fleeting than something you might have in common with a friend. Now, you can go through certain experiences with a friend that can cause unbreakable bonds of friendship. But when it comes to cousins, you have a starting point of you have the same grandparents. And so you care more about those you're genetically related to compared to random strangers or let me put it to you this way. Genes are forever. Everything else with friends and such is finite. Because I know that I'm an exception when it comes to friends from school, having friends from middle school or high school, or even as far back as elementary school. A lot of people don't really stay in touch with them. Basically, my entire friend circle is people I went to elementary school, middle school, and high school with, and college to an extent. College a little less so because all three of the Henriotti members from when I went to college, I only really talk regularly with one of them. And I haven't seen her in person in almost 6 years now, so there's also that. Anyway, I'm gonna leave it here for the video. You let me know in the comments down below what you think about all this, whether you also see the benefits of having so many cousins or close-knit families, or if you're experiencing the only child situation and being the youngest person in your family. I'd love to hear the different perspectives. Don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe for daily videos of cultural commentary from a man caught between generations. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.